Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Now, you guys have been asking and demanding, where are the dragons? And these comments here. So yeah, you guys have been asking for a dragon for a bit, and I was thinking to myself, I was like, guys, the water dragon just came out a little bit ago. It hasn't even been that long. Like, I need a little bit of a break. And then I actually looked at when the water dragon came out and was just like, ooh, it's been a little bit. So I was like, fine. It is time for the dragon series to return. And so now we are going to be continuing on with the elements that I have been doing, and we are going to be making an air dragon. And I had a really cool design in mind for him. That's not your typical what you would think for an air dragon, but I think he turns out really cool, and he looks really cool. And my Patreons helped me come up with the design and helped me pick, and they picked the one I wanted, so I was very happy. And this guy was just really cool. Pain in my butt, but very cool. So I never really asked because I normally don't really care, but he was a labor of love. So if you guys happen by the end of it to enjoy the video, and maybe you want to give it a little like or a little subscribe here or a little comment saying that I don't know how you survived, but you did a good job. I would very much appreciate it. Okay, let's go get started. So the dragon's head took a few times to get right. This first time with 3D sculpting, it wasn't bad per se, but he just looks a little strange and weird, and he wasn't really what I was going for. So let's just get rid of him. Yeah, okay. So then I said, well, to heck with 3D sculpting then. I'll just sculpt it with normal clay myself and it'll be fine. So I don't hate him again. I actually really like how his head turned out, but it just, again, wasn't the look I wanted and envisioned for the air dragon. Also, I kind of low-key burned him. I'm so sorry, little fella. This project is just starting off with a bang already. So now I have a head that I don't really know what to do with. So if you guys have any suggestions on what I should do with this now dragon head that I have no idea what to do with, please leave it in the comments down below. So then I decided to go back to 3D sculpting, and I said, I'm gonna do it third time's the charm, let's go. So now that's the actual beginning of this video. And I never want to try to hide this stuff away, and I always want to show it because me doing this for years and years, I'm still not gonna always get it right the first time. Like, I can't always expect it to go perfectly right and me get it right off the bat, first try, slam dunk, we got it. No, you're gonna mess up a lot sometimes, and you're just gonna have to keep pushing through it and keep growing and learning from your previous attempts until you get an attempt that you're really proud of, which is attempt number 3, because attempt number 3 I was really proud of. Now, the Dragon series is definitely the type of videos where I push myself to the limits of what my skill set currently is. So this is definitely less of a tutorial and more just of a, here's how I made something really cool and epic, I hope you enjoy it. That's always how these videos end up being, because I understand that 3D sculpting isn't entirely accessible to everybody. It is easy to get access to if you know where to look, but I understand it's not. If anybody is interested, however, I would highly suggest Blender or Sculptress, as those are both free programs that you don't need to pay for anything, and you know, if you need an iPad or a phone, you can also get Nomad Sculpt, which is a little bit of money, but that makes it even more portable for you to do 3D sculpting. So you got options out there. Nothing beats just going to the art store and getting some clay, I'm aware of that, but for anybody who would like to try this, it is accessible for you. So for the air dragon, I didn't want to go very typical with it. Like, I didn't want to do like clouds in the skies and bright blues and stuff. Like, that's just really common, and I didn't really want to do that. So when I envisioned the air dragon, I pictured something very old and angry and storm-like. So I imagined he's still air, but he causes storms and stuff in the clouds and stuff. So maybe he's best friends with the water dragon, and that's why he's creating rainstorms and things like that. But very windy and just aggressive is what I pictured him. And because I want him to be old, I'm giving him a lot of bumps, and I just picture him as an old grandpa. Like, I'm angry, I'm gonna make storms because I'm grumpy because these kids are on my lawn. So I just wanted him wrinkly and grumpy and just to be like, I will strike you down with lightning. You look at me the wrong way. So that's the kind of vibe I was going for with him. And even Sarah came out with a way to make that make sense, especially for an air dragon, that when he was younger, he was the typical, I'm in the clouds, I'm making fluffy things, and the bright blue skies and stuff. And as he got older and wiser, and Grandpa Yi, he got grumpy and turned dark and stormy and was just like, I am going to go cause mayhem because you all are making me angry. So I thought it fit really well. I think it looks really cool. And so I hope you guys enjoy it too. While I was sculpting him, I was looking at a ton of photos of art and things because I wanted Eastern dragon influences. So I was looking at a lot of Japanese dragons, Korean dragons, Chinese dragons, just the Eastern dragon aesthetic in general, just so I can get a general idea of how I wanted this guy to look. Because as I always say, guys, references, people, references, okay? I was just using an absolute ton of them to get a general idea of what I wanted this air dragon to look like. And I will shout it from the mountaintops. As always, I highly recommend references. They will always just help you bump up your art a little bit more than what you think you were possible doing, because you were using references to help your mind see things from different angles and get a general idea of what you're going for. I will always recommend it. Now, sometimes it doesn't work out. Even with references, I had no idea what I wanted to do with his antler horns. I ended up just kind of going like, well, we're going to take a sphere and we're going to squiggle, squiggle, squaggle everywhere and we're going to see what happens. And I'm going to pretend like I know exactly what I'm doing and I knew the exact textures I wanted and the exact shape I wanted, and absolutely not. I just kind of pulled and pushed the horns around until I was like, huh. That kind of looks fantasy-ish. Sure, let's go with that. And so it ended up working really well. And sometimes that's just how things go. And that's exactly my process. It's the go for it method. We don't know how we got here. We just got here and we're okay with it. For all my 3D printing, I use an Anycubic Photon Mono X. And while everything is printing, let's talk about this video's sponsor, Factor Meals. Do you remember when you had time and energy to go grocery shopping? I know sometimes it's hard to find the time or energy for cooking, let alone grocery shopping. Factor Meals takes all the guesswork out and delivers no hassle prepared foods so you can spend your time working on the things you love. Factor Meals helps you stay away from takeaway and expensive deliveries, which I tend to have a problem with, and is a go-to lunch or dinner solution when I'm busy editing videos or working on giant projects like this. These meals show up fresh and pre-prepared to your door, ready in literally just 2 minutes and perfect for the busy lifestyles out there that just need a little bit of a helping hand. Wow. Factor Meals now being owned by HelloFresh means that there's even more variety and options out there, which is great because now when I switch between brands, I can know that I'm always going to be getting something new. So if you're like me or Little Chef and you want to try something new, head to go.factor75.com/KP120 and use code KP120 to get $120 off. And thank you once again to Factor Meals for sponsoring this video. And here he is out of the printer, all nice and in his grumpy glory. Now, something I do need to address is you'll notice, it might be hard to see on the camera, but you'll notice little bumps and stuff, and that's from the printer supports while it's printing. And so I'm going to go and sand those off a little bit. Now it's time to make Noodle Boy's armature, and for those asking, I use ball and sockets, and there are a link for those in the description. Now that the armature's finished, it's time to build up his body, and for that I use quilt batting, and it's pretty readily available anywhere. You can get it from any craft store, you can even get it from like Walmart or Amazon, and it comes in this really big sheet because it's, well, made for quilts, and I cut it into really long strips and I'll just wrap it around the body over and over until it's built up to the thickness that I want. Now, something I always want to remind you, if anybody's actually going to go out and make art dolls, is that you want to make sure you don't build up the body quite as much as you want the final end result to be, because whatever fabric you were going to add on top of it is going to add additional thickness. So you want to make sure you keep that in mind when you're building up the body, because otherwise you'll get a body shape that you don't end up wanting. But like I always say, if you want chunk boy, you go and you get chunk boy. If you want thin boy, you go and you get thin boy, okay? We support all body shapes and sizes here. Now for him, he was noodle boy. I wanted him to be kind of thickums in some spot and kind of noodly in other spots. But that's the look I was going for, because he's a noodle dragon. Now, I wanted to give the noodle dragon some fairy lights on the inside. In hindsight, I wish I would have done LED strips so they would have diffused a little bit better. But I put some fairy lights around his body because I wanted to give him a lightning effect. And so, like, the fairy lights on strobe effect really looked like that, especially when it was in the dark. So I added a little bit of extra quilt batting over it just to diffuse it a little bit better. So you can kind of see the little bit of variation between those two that it adds. And when I add additional fabric on top of it and scales on top of it, it'll diffuse even better and hopefully look really, really cool. Now for his eyes, I'm doing the exact same thing I did with Grimm, so I'm just going to go over it really quickly. All I did was take some glass capuchons and then use some UV resin on the backs and the eye color I wanted, hashtag no people gang. And then I wanted to make sure that I did a really thin layer so that the lights would shine bright really through it, but it still looked and gave the impression of opaqueness. And then I just position the fairy lights right behind the eyes and then glue them into place. Now I wish there was another method I could use, because for very hooded eyes the cabochons look very shadowy and it's really hard to see the color, but for now that's the best I got. Popping in for your not so daily reminder that you have been thinking about a project, be it art related or just something that you've been really wanting to do, but you have just been constantly talking yourself out of it, and you're just saying to yourself,
I'm not good enough, I'm not talented enough, there's no way I'm going to do that, it's just gonna fail.
I don't even know where to get all these supplies, and no, I can't do it, just no.
Hey, you look at me in these eyes holes, okay? You look at me right here, okay? You can go and do that thing, okay? That thing that you have been thinking about, you can absolutely go start it and you can go rock it, okay? I absolutely believe in you. You guys tell me all the time about how much you believe in me, so I believe in you, okay? While the rest of this video is playing, like I always say, go start the first steps to doing that whatever that project is. If it's an art project, go get your pencils together, go get your paintbrushes, your paint, sculpting tools, sculpture, stuffage, go get that all together. Whatever project it is, either go make a list of steps you need to do to complete it, or go get the materials together, or just go start it, okay? I promise you, you will feel so proud of yourself if you actually go and start this with this video, and you have an art buddy. I'm right here, and we can art together, and it'll be a fun time, so go do it. I promise, it'll be great. I love you. Go drink water. I almost forgot. Go drink some water, okay? Go drink some water. I'd also like to share with you these wonderful art pieces. Look at them. Aren't they so talented? Aren't they so beautiful? Just mwah, mwah. If you would like to show me something that you have made, be it an art doll, fan art, or just anything in general that you would like for me to see, please use the hashtag KP tutorials so that I can find it and possibly share it in my next video. Okay, now back to the project that I'm sure I'm not dying at right now. So for sewing his body, we're going to breeze through it pretty quickly because the footage is kind of all over the place and my sewing method is kind of all over the place. But essentially, I wanted to wrap him in a cotton fabric because I'm going to be sewing a bunch of scales over him. And so I needed something for those scales to be able to attach to. But I really wanted to try to minimize any additional thickness. So all I did is I rolled out the cotton fabric over his body, and then I cut slits where his legs were, and I kind of slid the legs through that. And then I just kind of sewed it closed very jankily and tightly over his body, just trimming it down so that it was really nice and snug. Now at first I did sew in some faux fur fabric right around his back because I wanted to have that fluffy flowing aspect that a lot of Eastern dragons have, but I didn't really like how that looked because the faux fur just looks really straight, but I wanted it to kind of look more cloud-like and more fluffy-like, so I ended up using some felting wool to really give that thick, poofy texture that I was going for. You'll also notice while I'm sewing his legs that I'm strategically leaving a couple of the ball and socket joints uncovered. And I'm doing that for a very specific reason that we're going to get into later in the video, but just know that that's intentional. So like I mentioned just a little bit ago, I didn't really like how the faux fur was looking, and so now I'm taking a bunch of the felting wool and I'm just putting a bunch of hot glue over it, and I'm just gluing it right on top, and it just looks so fluffy and poofy, and I absolutely love how this looked. It turned out much better than the faux fur would have. So, about his scales. First of all, I wanted to use a scale fabric, but editor Sarah had to go and increase the scope of this video and convince me that we needed to sew every single scale on for a very cool effect. Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate it. So, I originally 3D printed a crap ton of scales, and I'm pretty sure my 3D printer now really hates me for how much I was just making that thing pump out scales. But I printed a bunch, and I was originally going to sew them all on, but it didn't really end up looking right and working really well. So then I decided to just glue them on, and I didn't want to use hot glue because some of these scales were really heavy, and I wanted to make sure that we were going to be able to have them nice secure and to be able to go over each other very well. So I ended up using Fabri-tac, which is a fabric glue, and it stayed nice and flexible, and it really grips really well, and it dries relatively quickly, and it's just an absolute beast of an adhesive, and I absolutely love it. And it worked really well for these scales, and so it was just chef's kiss. It was absolutely beautiful. Now before I let this time lapse go, you'll notice that some of the scales have like cuts in them, and that has everything to do with intentional design and not my printer nearly failing the scales, and I decided to use them anyway. So you may notice that I have left a few joints bare, and that's because I actually want to give him swappable feet. I 3D printed 2 different sets of feet, one that was nice and flat so he could stand on the ground, and one where if we wanted to pose him or hang him from the ceiling or something where he was floating, I wanted to give it a look that he was actually curling his knuckles in flight. And so to cover those joints, I actually off camera, because I didn't really know what I was doing and I had to kind of figure it out, I just made a kind of shin guard thing where I used the cotton as a base and then put some scales and magnets over it, and that's going to wrap around the joints while giving it still free movement and making it completely removable so that you could easily remove and switch out the feet as you wanted. And now it is time for the thing I was most excited for, and that was painting, because I really was just excited to make this guy look how I wanted and just really bring him to life. Now I needed to mask off all his little fluffy bits because I am going to go over him with a really dark coat with my airbrush. This was mostly just to make sure all of the cotton that was a little bit visible disappeared and it would blend in with the scales and be much harder to see. And after that base color, it was just a heck of a lot of dry brushing. This entire piece was just a dark base coat and at least 3 lighter tones of dry brushing on top of that. And so there's not much to say about all this because I'm pretty much just repeating the same steps over and over again, so I'm just gonna let the painting speak for itself. With the addition of epic music, of course, because he is an epic boy. Please enjoy. Once all the painting is done, we have to uncover those fierce eyes that definitely have lightning behind them and not LEDs. For that, I'm just using a sewing pin. You can use a toothpick or just anything because it's glass. It just easily scrapes off the paint. And the final step is to add a luscious beard, eyebrows, and mane to his head. Now, one common thing I've seen with Eastern dragons is that a lot of them have, you know, fur and hair in those areas. And it also really ties in with the whole look of him being a grumpy grandpa, because I just feel like he would have unruly, messy hair and just be like, you guys are making me mad, I'm gonna get all electric-y and I'm gonna zap you. So I wanted to add a ton of hair just to make him look very old and epic, and it really tied it in and it really made him look cool. But after all of that, this epic boy is done and we can finally look at the final shots.